So now we will be looking at factoring to graph. So we're going to be moving away from the table of values. So here for the first one, it's a regular trinomial. And we will be looking at two numbers multiplied together that gives me negative 12. But if I add these two same numbers, it would give me 4. So what are these two numbers? They are, in fact, 6 and negative 2. So you can look at all the factors of 12 and go through them, and then you would see that the only one that would fit is 6 and negative 2. Now, those aren't my roots. Those are my zeros. So that means that y equals x plus 6, x minus 2. So that's my factored expression. So this is the same as this trinomial. If I were to develop this, if I were to multiply this binomial by that binomial, I would again get this trinomial. Now, what are my roots? My roots are negative 6, 0, and then 2, 0. That means that if x is 2, 2 minus 2 would give me 0, 0 times this would give me 0. So these are my roots. So I can graph that, 0, 2, and then negative 6 here. That means my axis of symmetry would be found exactly halfway between these two. So if it's a total distance of 8, 4 between, so my axis symmetry would be found here at negative 2. So that's my axis of symmetry at x equals negative 2. And that's also the x value in my vertex. So negative 2 squared is 4. Minus 4, 2 times minus 4 is negative 8. Negative 8 and negative 12 is negative 20. So that gives me negative 20 plus 4. So negative 16. So my vertex would be, in fact, negative 2, negative 16. So it would be somewhere down here. Negative 2, I'll write that down, negative 2, negative 16. So my parabola would look like this. It would be for something like that. So that'd be the first one for a regular trinomial. Second one is a difference of square. So I'm looking for the root for each one. So the root of this is 3x, and the root of 100 is 10. So 3x minus 10, and then 3x plus 10. If I were to develop this, I would get this binomial expression again. Just real quickly, look, you would have by multiplying these two terms, you would have that term show up, and then you would have 3x times 10x would give me 30x, and then the negative 30x would cancel my first degree term, my coefficient of the first degree. So what are my roots? Well, my roots, when is this 0? Well, x would be 0, right? That's what I'm looking for. When is y going to be 0? So it's going to be 0 when x, you can solve this each one if you like, but basically it's going to be at 10 over 3, and so my roots would be 10 over 3 if you wish, 0, and then negative 10 over 3. So what's fun about difference of squares is my axis of symmetry will always be 0, because I have 10 over 3, which is 3 and a third here, and then I have negative 3 and a third. But if I split the difference between those two, difference of square, the axis of symmetry will always be found at x equals 0, which basically is the axis, y-axis, meaning that my summit will be, my vertex would be 0, 1, negative 100. So I can graph that. I'd have way down here, it wouldn't fit on my graph. I'd have to use a scale of 10. So e squared would be 10. So let's say that would be 0, negative 100. because if x is 0 here, I would get negative 100 for my y value. So my graph would look something like this. If I have a scale of 10 for each y value, each squared is worth 10. Okay, finally here, this is the one that students struggle the most with. It's when factoring a common factor. So what is the common factor here? I have a 3 and an x, so negative 3x. So that would be my common factor. Once you found that, is you have to divide each term by negative 3x. So negative 3x squared divided by negative 3x would give me x. And then negative 3x, negative 9x divided by negative 3. How many negative 3x are there in there? There are 3 of them. So that's my factorization. And what are my roots? I'm always going to have 0, 0 as one of them because if x is 0, it would give me 0 for y. And then my other root would be negative 3. So these are my two roots. What is my axis of symmetry? If I split the distance between those two, it would actually be at 1/2. So my axis of symmetry would be found at x equals 1.5. Now I have to substitute that in there to find my vertex. So you could use a calculator of negative, you have to do a 1.5 times 1.5 or 15 times 15, which is 225. And then, so 225 times negative 3, which would give me negative 675. And then negative 9 times 1.5 would give me negative 13.5. So if I were to group these two terms together, 6.5 would give me 20, so negative 20.25. So roughly 20.25. If each square here were worth 2, you could say that my vertex would be found at negative at 1.5 and negative 20.25. So again, I would have a parabola that would look something like that. There we go. And that's how you factor and graph. First you have to factor, then you find your roots, and then you have to find your axis of symmetry, and then your vertex, and then you're good to go.